I'm Sarah Nguyen, 31 years old. My family mocked my hobby as a childish fantasy, but at our reunion, my $150 million app left them speechless. This is the story of how I proved them wrong and reclaimed my worth. Growing up in the Nguyen household was like living in a house of mirrors, where every reflection showed someone else's glory. My parents, Minh and Linh Nguyen, are real estate moguls in Austin, Texas, their names etched into the skyline of luxury condos and gated communities. Their empire, Nguyen Properties, is a household name. Their faces on billboards, their deals the stuff of local legend. My older brother, Ethan, is their pride and joy, an aerospace engineer whose jet engine designs have won awards at a top firm, his trophies gleaming on our family's mantle like a shrine. And then there's me, Sarah, the dreamer, the one who never fit their polished vision of success. From as far back as I can remember, our home was a stage for ambition. Our dinner table was a war room, my parents plotting their next land acquisition while Ethan, 4 years older, sketched rocket schematics on napkins, his pencil scratching out equations I couldn't yet understand. They had a plan for us. Ethan would conquer the skies, and I'd follow a respectable path: business, finance, maybe law, something to uphold the Nguyen legacy. "You're a Nguyen," my father would say, his voice heavy with expectation, as if our name carried a divine mandate. My mother would nod, her eyes sharp with visions of my future corner office. They weren't cruel, not in the obvious ways, but their love came with strings, and I was never good at staying tethered. I was different. While Ethan memorized physics formulas and my parents closed million-dollar deals, I was drawn to stories, to ideas, to the magic of creation. At 10, I found an old PC in our garage, a clunky relic from the early 2000s, its fan buzzing like a swarm of bees. It was slow, prone to crashing, but to me, it was a portal. I'd sneak into the garage after homework, the glow of the screen my only light, and teach myself to code from library books and grainy YouTube tutorials. My first program was a simple quiz game for my classmates, a trivia app about animals. When I showed it to my 5th grade class and they cheered as it ran, I felt a spark I'd never known, a sense of power, of possibility. I ran home, my heart pounding, and showed it to my parents. "Look, I made this," I said, pointing at the screen. My mother's smile was polite, strained. "That's cute, Sarah," she said, already turning back to her paperwork. "But focus on your math homework." My father was blunter, his voice clipped. "Computers are for playing, not a career. Don't waste your time." Ethan was the worst. At 14, he was already the golden child, his science fair medals lining our hallway, his teachers calling him a prodigy. He'd barge into my room, see my screen full of code, and scoff. "What's this, your little toy?" he'd say, his laugh sharp as a blade. "You're gonna end up a basement hacker, Sarah, fixing viruses for pocket change." I'd hunch closer to my keyboard, my cheeks burning, and keep typing. His words cut deep, but they didn't stop me. Coding was my refuge, the one place I could build something without their judgment. In that glowing world of variables and loops, I wasn't the disappointing sister or the wayward daughter. I was a creator, someone who mattered. Middle school was when the rift started to show. My parents enrolled me in business camps, hoping I'd inherit their knack for negotiation. I'd sit through lectures on market trends, my mind wandering to the apps I was building and secrete a journal app for kids, a virtual pet game. At 13, I entered a local hackathon, my first real test. I spent weeks preparing, coding a study tool that quizzed users on history facts. When my team took 2nd place, I was over the moon, clutching my certificate like it was gold. I showed it to my parents at dinner, expecting pride. My father barely glanced at it. "2nd place for a computer game?" he said, his tone flat. "That's not a plan, Sarah." My mother suggested I join the debate team, something that builds real skills. Ethan, home from his robotics camp, smirked. "Keep dreaming, sis. Maybe you'll code a trophy one day." The table laughed, and I stared at my plate, my victory turning to ash. High school was a battlefield. My parents doubled down, pushing me toward AP economics and business law, their vision of my future in real estate growing clearer. Ethan, now at MIT, would call home with tales of his internships at Boeing, his voice brimming with confidence. I tried to please them, acing my classes, joining the student council, but my heart was in the computer lab, where I'd spend lunch hours building apps for school projects. At 16, I won a regional coding competition with an app that helped students organize their homework. The prize was a $1,000 scholarship, and I thought naively that it would change their minds. I presented it at a family dinner, my hands sweaty. "This could help kids learn," I said, my voice hopeful. My father frowned, his fork pausing mid-air. $1,000 for typing? That's pocket change, Sarah. My mother sighed. Why don't you focus on something stable like marketing? Ethan leaned back, his grin mocking. Nice toy, but it's not going to pay the bills. I left the table early, my throat tight, vowing to prove them wrong. College was my rebellion. I applied to the University of Texas at Austin's computer science program, one of the best in the country, and got in with a full scholarship. When I told my parents, the kitchen went silent, the air thick with their disapproval. "Computer science?" my mother said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "That's for techies, not Nguyen's." My father shook his head, his eyes cold. "You're throwing away your potential, Sarah. Why can't you be more like Ethan?" The comparison stung, a wound that never healed. Ethan, home for the holidays, piled on. "You're gonna regret this, sis," he said, tossing me an article about real engineering jobs. "Coding apps isn't a career, it's a hobby." I stood my ground, my voice trembling but firm. "This is what I want. I'm doing it." They didn't speak to me for a month, their silence louder than any lecture. At UT, I came alive. The computer science department was a wonderland of ideas AI, app development, human-computer interaction. I'd stay up late in the lab, surrounded by classmates who spoke my language, their energy fueling mine. I built apps for Funa Music Playlist Generator, a virtual study group platform, each one sharpening my skills. But every call home was a reminder of the chasm between us. "How's school?" my mother would ask, her tone cautious. When I tried to explain my project's an app to help kids with dyslexia read, a peer tutoring platform, she'd interrupt. "That sounds complicated. Have you thought about an MBA? It's not too late." Ethan was worse, texting me links to serious tech jobs at Google or Tesla, as if my dreams were a childish phase. By my senior year, I'd stopped trying to win their approval. I graduated with honors in 2016, my diploma a quiet victory. My parents attended the ceremony, their smiles stiff, their congratulations brief. Ethan didn't show up, he was too busy presenting a paper at a conference. I moved into a tiny apartment in East Austin, its walls thin and its AC barely functional, and started freelancing as a developer. The work paid the bills, but my real passion was a side project I'd been nurturing since junior year, an app to make education accessible for underserved kids. I called it LearnBright, a platform that used AI to tailor lessons to each child's needs, helping those who couldn't afford tutors or elite schools. It was my way of giving back, of proving that tech could be a force for good. I poured everything into LearnBright nights, weekends, every spare dollar. I'd sit in my apartment, my laptop glowing, dreaming of kids who'd discover their potential because of my work. But my family didn't know it existed. I'd tried to tell them once at a rare family dinner in my mid-20s. "I'm working on an education app," I said, my voice cautious. "It could help kids learn." My father snorted, cutting into his steak. "An app for homework? That's not a business, Sarah." My mother patted my hand, her smile patronizing. "It's nice to have projects, dear, but you need stability." Ethan smirked, his eyes glinting. "What's it called, kids play?" "Good luck with that." The table laughed, and I shrank into my chair, my dream reduced to a punchline. After that, I built a wall between my world and theirs. I didn't tell them when LearnBright got its first users, or when schools started piloting it, or when I quit freelancing to focus on it full-time. Their dismissal had taught me to protect my dreams, to keep them safe from their scorn. But deep down, I couldn't escape the ache of their rejection. The little girl who still wanted her parents to be proud, her brother to see her as an equal. That ache was a fire, and LearnBright was my fuel. I'd show them not for their approval, but for me. The dream that became LearnBright wasn't born in a sleek tech incubator or a glass-walled office. It started in a gritty coffee shop in East Austin, where the air was thick with the scent of over-roasted beans, and the tables bore the scars of 1,000 late-night conversations. It was late 2019, and I was 25. My life a precarious balancing act of freelance coding gigs and a burning ambition that kept me up until dawn. My apartment was a monument to my hustle, a sagging couch that smelled faintly of tacos, a wobbly desk cluttered with empty ramen bowls, and a laptop that wheezed like it was on life support. I'd spend my evenings buried in education research, my eyes stinging from the glare of my screen, haunted by a single unshakable truth. Too many kids in Austin's underfunded schools were being left behind, their potential crushed by outdated textbooks and teachers stretched to breaking. I couldn't stop thinking, what if I could build something to help them? What if technology could give them a chance to shine? That's when Javier Torres crashed into my life, turning my vague idea into a mission. I was at a tech meetup in a cramped co-working space near downtown, a room packed with developers in hoodies and venture capitalists, sniffing for the next big thing. I'd signed up to pitch my half-baked concept for an education app, my nerves jangling like loose change. Standing at the front, my voice shaky, I explained my vision. A platform that used AI to personalize learning, adapting to each child's needs, making education accessible for kids who couldn't afford tutors or private schools. The room was polite but unimpressed, their applause tepid. As I stepped down, a man approached, his dark eyes bright with something I couldn't place. "You're onto something big," he said, his voice warm but urgent. "I'm Javier. Let's talk." Javier was a former middle school teacher, a 30-something bundle of energy who'd spent a decade in Austin's toughest schools. He was the son of Mexican immigrants, raised in San Antonio, and he carried a fire for kids who reminded him of his own childhood bright but overlooked, their dreams buried under systemic neglect. Over beers at a nearby taco truck, we talked until the stars came out, our ideas piling up like kindling. "I've seen kids give up because no one could teach them right," he said, his hands gesturing wildly. "Your app could change that. I'm in." It wasn't a question, it was a vow. That night, LearnBright was born, a dream scratched out on a greasy napkin under a flickering streetlight. Javier and I were an unlikely pair. He was all heart, a storyteller who could make a room laugh or cry with a single anecdote. I was the tech brain, quiet but relentless, my world built on logic and code. We set up shop in my apartment, a 500 square foot box with peeling paint and a window that rattled in the Texas wind. Javier would arrive with stacks of pedagogy books and his mother's homemade tamales, and we'd dive in, surrounded by whiteboards scrawled with algorithms, lesson plans, and dreams too big for our tiny space. Our goal was audacious, an app called LearnBright that could analyze a child's learning style, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tailor lessons in real time, making education feel like a game, not a chore. We weren't just coding, we were trying to rewrite the rules of learning, to give every kid a shot at success. The early days were a brutal slog. We cold emailed every principal in Austin, begging for a chance to pilot our app. Most ignored us, others sent polite rejections. "We don't have the budget," or "tech isn't our priority." We'd pile into Javier's ancient Toyota Corolla, its AC long dead, and drive to schools across the city, pitching to skeptical administrators who saw us as kids playing at innovation. "Come back when you have proof it works," one principal told us, her tone final. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the water stains on my ceiling, my family's voices echoing in my head. A hobby, not a business. Why can't you be like Ethan? I wondered if they were right, if I was pouring my life into a pipe dream. Javier was my anchor. He'd seen his own share of doubters, parents who thought teaching was a lesser career, colleagues who dismissed his push for equity, and he'd learned to turn rejection into fuel. "We're not doing this for them," he'd say, slamming his laptop shut after another dead-end meeting. "We're doing it for the kids. Keep going, Sarah." His conviction was contagious, pulling me back from the edge. We'd sit on my floor, eating cold pizza, and talk about the future, not just LearnBright, but the kids we'd help, the schools we'd transform, the lives we'd touch. Those moments were our oxygen, keeping us alive through the grind. Our first prototype was a disaster, a clunky mess of code that crashed more often than it ran. We'd spent 6 months building it, teaching the AI to parse learning patterns, only to watch it choke on simple math quizzes. I remember one night, after a particularly humiliating failure, when I threw my mouse across the room, my frustration boiling over. "This is impossible," I said, my voice breaking. "We're wasting our time." Javier didn't blink. He picked up the mouse, handed it back, and said, "You don't get to quit, Sarah. Those kids are counting on us." Then he pulled up the code and started debugging line by line until I joined him. We worked until dawn, and by sunrise, we'd fixed a bug that let the app adapt to user responses. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step, and that was enough. The breakthrough came in early 2020, when a small charter school in East Austin agreed to test LearnBright. We'd poured every penny into the Pilot Me savings, Javier's emergency fund, even a loan from his sister. We skipped meals, worked 18-hour days, and prayed the app wouldn't crash. The results were beyond our hopes. 85% of students improved their reading and math scores, and teachers reported kids engaging like never before. One student, a 12-year-old girl named Mia, wrote us a note. "Thank you for making learning fun. I want to be a scientist now." I framed it, hanging it above my desk, a reminder of why we started. That pilot wasn't just data, it was proof we could change lives. From there, LearnBright took off. We quit freelancing, a leap that felt like diving off a cliff. We rented a tiny office in Austin's tech corridor, a former storage room with flickering lights, and a coffee machine that spat out sludge. We hired a team. 3 developers, a designer, and an educator who'd seen LearnBright's magic firsthand. I learned to pitch, standing in rooms full of venture capitalists who saw education tech as a long shot. As a young Asian woman in a male-dominated industry, I faced skepticism at every turn I rolls when I explained our AI, patronizing smiles when I talked impact. "Nice idea," they'd say, already checking their phones. "But where's the profit?" Javier was our secret weapon, his passion disarming even the coldest investors. While he told stories of kids like Mia, I'd fire up the demo, letting the data speak. Slowly, we won them over. By 2022, LearnBright had its first major contract with a Dallas school district, serving 10,000 students. The results were staggering. Test scores up 20%, dropout rates down. Word spread, and soon we were in Houston, San Antonio, even Chicago. We hired more staff, upgraded our office, and dreamed bigger international expansion, new subjects, partnerships with nonprofits. But growth brought pressure. Investors demanded faster rollouts, schools needed constant support, and our team was stretched thin. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by the fear of failing not just myself, but the kids who depended on us. Javier and I argued sometimes, our stress spilling into debates over priorities or budgets, but we always came back to our why. The kids, the mission, the chance to make a difference. In 2024, we hit a milestone that felt like a miracle. LearnBright was valued at $100 million. By 2025, that number climbed to $150 million, with over 1 million users across the U.S. Schools sent us letters, students who'd gone from failing to thriving, parents grateful for a tool that worked. One teacher wrote, "LearnBright gave my kids wings." I kept that letter next to Mia's, a testament to our impact. We'd just closed a $30 million funding round led by Laura Chen, a venture capitalist who'd backed edtech giants. At our first meeting, she leaned across the table, her eyes piercing. "You're not just a founder, Sarah," she said. "You're a visionary. LearnBright is the future." Her words were the validation I'd craved my whole life, the kind my family had never offered. But my family? They knew nothing. I tried to tell them, back when LearnBright was a spark. At a family dinner in 2021, I'd gathered my courage, my hands sweaty under the table. "I'm starting an app to help kids learn," I said. My father snorted, cutting into his steak. "An app for homework? That's not a business, Sarah." My mother patted my arm, her smile condescending. "It's nice to have projects, dear, but you need stability." Ethan smirked, his eyes glinting. "What's it called, kids play? Good luck with that." Their laughter was a knife, and I stopped trying. I didn't tell them when we got our first school, or when we hit 1 million users, or when EdTech magazine named me a rising star. Their dismissal had taught me to protect my dreams, to keep them safe from their scorn. But deep down, I carried the ache of their rejection, the little girl who still wanted her parents' pride, her brother's respect. As 2025 unfolded, LearnBright was soaring, but I was restless. The reunion invitation was coming, though I didn't know it yet. It would force me to face the family I'd spent years avoiding, to confront the pain I'd buried under my success. Javier saw it before I did. One night, as we celebrated a new contract, he raised his coffee mug and said, "To you, Sarah, you've built something incredible. Now it's time to show the world who you are." I laughed, thinking he meant investors or competitors. But looking back, I think he meant my family. He knew the real battle wasn't in the code or the classroom, it was in my heart. The invitation arrived on a sweltering June morning in 2025. A glossy card slipped into my mailbox, its bright design clashing with the dread it stirred in my chest. I was 31, the CEO of LearnBright, a $150 million edtech empire that had transformed thousands of lives. But that card felt like a summons to a trial. The Nguyen family reunion was a yearly spectacle, a sprawling barbecue at my parents' ranch outside Austin, where relatives gathered to celebrate our legacy of ambition and achievement. This year's event was billed as the grandest yet, with a guest speaker, Rosa Martinez, a celebrated local teacher set to share how education had uplifted her community. Tucked inside the card was my mother's handwritten note, her elegant script as commanding as ever. "Sarah, we expect you to attend. Don't let us down." I stood in my East Austin apartment, the card trembling in my hands, my coffee forgotten on the counter. The words, "Don't let us down," hit like a whip, dragging me back to a lifetime of moments when I'd fallen short. The blush on a math test that earned my father's frown, the piano recital where I stumbled and my mother's smile tightened, the family dinners where my voice was drowned out by my brother Ethan's triumphs. I hadn't been to a reunion in 4 years, not since the one where Ethan, now a hotshot aerospace engineer, had mocked my coding nonsense in front of our aunts and uncles, their laughter echoing as I fled to my car, tears blurring the highway. I'd built a life without them, LearnBright, my team, my purpose, and I'd convinced myself their approval didn't matter. But this invitation cracked that facade, stirring a longing I'd buried deep. The little girl who still wanted her parents to see her, to be proud. For days, I left the card on my kitchen counter, its presence a constant weight. I'd walk past it on my way to work, my mind churning with indecision. Part of me wanted to burn it, to shield the world I'd created from their judgment. They didn't know about LearnBright how it had reached 1 million students, how it was valued at $150 million, how EdTech magazine had called me a visionary. To them, I was still the failure, the daughter who'd chosen toys over a real career. Why subject myself to their scrutiny again? But another part, the part that remembered my father's rare, warm hugs when I was a kid, the way my mother used to braid my hair while humming whispered that this could be a chance to show them who I'd become. Not for their validation, but for the version of me that still ached to be seen. I brought the invitation to work, hoping Javier, my co-founder and closest confidant, could help me decide. Our office was a hive of purpose developers debugging code, educators crafting lessons, whiteboards covered in ideas for new features. Javier was at his desk, surrounded by empty coffee cups, grading mock lessons for our app. I slid the card across, and he raised an eyebrow, his dark eyes scanning the cheerful design. "Family reunion?" he said, flipping it open. "Sounds like a blast. Barbecue? Relatives? Drama what's not to love?" I sighed, slumping into a chair. "It's a minefield, Javier. They don't know about LearnBright. They think I'm wasting my life on hobbies. If I go, they'll tear me apart." Javier leaned back, his expression softening. He knew my historia-very-cutting remark, every dismissed dream. "Sarah, you're not the kid they used to ignore," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You're the woman who built a $150 million company that's changing lives. You walk into that reunion, You're not just their daughter, you're Sarah Nguyen, badass CEO. Show them what you've done. Not for them, but for you." His words struck a chord, a spark of courage igniting in my chest. He was right. I'd face down skeptical investors, school boards, and tech giants. I could face my family. Still, the decision gnawed at me. I spent evenings pacing my apartment, the card a silent taunt on my counter. I replayed memories of past reunions, each one a fresh wound. There was the summer I was 15, when I'd tried to tell my father about a coding project of virtual library for my school and he'd cut me off with, "That's nice, Sarah, but have you thought about real estate?" Or the reunion when I was 22, fresh out of college, when Ethan had smirked and said, "Still playing with computers? Don't expect a corner office for that." Our relatives had laughed, and I'd burned with shame, retreating to the edge of the party, invisible in their world of success. Each memory was a brick in the wall I'd built between us, but the invitation threatened to tear it down. I called Mia, the student whose note had touched me years ago, now a college freshman studying biology. We met at a diner near my office, its vinyl booths and jukebox a comforting constant. I slid the invitation across the table, and she read it, her brow furrowing. "You have to go," she said, her voice fierce. "You built LearnBright for kids like me, Sarah. You're a hero. Don't let them make you feel small." Her words hit like a revelation, echoing Javier's. She was right, I wasn't going for my family. I was going for the girl who'd spent years feeling unseen, for the kids who believed in me, for the woman I'd become. The week before the reunion was a blur of nerves and preparation. Javier dragged me to a boutique in South Congress, where we spent hours trying on dresses. I chose a vibrant teal gown, its fabric catching the light like a tropical sea, its cut both elegant and bold. "You look like you could rule the world," Javier said, grinning as I twirled in the mirror. I laughed, but I felt it the power of owning who I was. We booked a salon appointment for hair and makeup, Javier insisting I go all out. "This isn't just a barbecue," he said. "It's your stage. Own it." I rehearsed how I'd talk about LearnBright, practicing in my bathroom mirror. "It's used in thousands of schools, valued at $150 million. I'd say, my voice steady. "It's helping kids who'd otherwise be left behind." I scripted responses to Ethan's inevitable jabs, determined to keep my cool. "Laugh all you want," I'd say, "but my hobby is changing lives." At work, I threw myself into a new feature launch, using the chaos to drown my anxiety. But at night, alone in my apartment, the doubts crept in. What if they laughed? What if they didn't care? What if I walked into that ranch and felt like a child again, small and unworthy? The night before the reunion, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my couch, the invitation in my hands, and let myself remember a moment I'd buried. I was 8, and my father had taken me to his office, a rare treat. I'd wandered his desk, awed by the stacks of contracts, the weight of his work. "You'll do great things, Sarah," he'd said, ruffling my hair. I'd believed him then, believed I could be like him. Somewhere along the way, that belief had fractured, replaced by his disappointment and my defiance. Now, on the cusp of facing him again, I wondered, could I reclaim that moment? Could I make them see me, not as the failure they'd labeled, but as the woman who'd surpassed their dreams? Javier called that night, sensing my nerves. "You've got this, Sarah," he said, his voice a lifeline. "You're not just going to that reunion, you're going to blow their minds." I clung to his words, letting them anchor me. This wasn't just a family gathering. It was a chance to rewrite my story, to stand tall in the face of their doubt, and to finally let go of the pain I'd carried for so long. The Nguyen family ranch was a vision of Texas grandeur, its rolling lawns stretching under ancient oaks, the air heavy with the scent of mesquite smoke and summer grass. It was July 2025, and I arrived at the reunion in my teal dress, the fabric shimmering under the midday sun, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The backyard was a riot of life cousins chasing kids across the grass, aunts gossiping over pitchers of iced tea, uncles tending a massive grill piled with ribs and brisket. A stage stood near the barn, draped in red, white, and blue bunting, where Miss Rosa Martinez, the guest speaker, would address the crowd. Cars lined the driveway, a testament to the reunion's scale, and I parked among them, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I was 31, the founder of a $150 million company, but stepping onto that lawn felt like walking into a battlefield. I made my way through the crowd, my heels sinking into the soft earth, relatives offering distracted waves or curious glances. I felt like an outsider, my presence a footnote in the Nguyen family saga. My parents were at the heart of it, as always. My father, Minh, stood tall in a crisp linen shirt, his laughter booming as he shook hands with uncles, his real estate empire the backdrop of every story. My mother, Linh, was radiant in a silk sundress, directing caterers with the precision of a general, her smile a perfect mask of hospitality. My brother Ethan held court nearby, his polo shirt emblazoned with his company's logo, regaling cousins with tales of his latest jet engine design, his confidence filling the air like smoke. They were the Nguyen's Austin's royalty, and I was the odd one out, the shadow they'd never bothered to notice. I approached, my stomach twisting, my dress suddenly feeling too bright, too bold. "Sarah," my mother called, waving me over with a smile that was all politeness, no warmth. Her eyes flicked over my dress, lingering just long enough to make me self-conscious. "You made it," she said, her tone clipped, as if my attendance was a minor miracle. "You look nice." The word was a concession, and I saw her glance at Ethan, comparing us as always. My father gave a curt nod, his attention already drifting to an uncle. "Good to see you, Sarah. Help your aunts with the drinks, whom?" No questions about my life, my work just a task to keep me occupied, a reminder of my place. Ethan was worse. He sauntered over, a beer in hand, his grin sharp as a knife. "Well, look who crawled out of her geek cave," he said, his voice loud enough to draw eyes. "Still tinkering with your little apps, Sarah? Or did you finally get a real job like I told you?" A few cousins chuckled, their laughter a needle under my skin. I felt my cheeks burn, the old shame rising like bile. I wanted to snap back, to tell him LearnBright was worth more than his entire career, that my little apps had changed lives. But I bit my tongue, my nails digging into my palms. Not yet, I thought. Let him have his moment. I forced a smile, muttered something vague, and took a seat at a picnic table, picking at a plate of ribs, feeling like a stranger in my own family. The afternoon unfolded with the usual Nguyen flair. Kids playing tag, aunts trading gossip, uncles debating football. My parents moved through the crowd, their charisma magnetic, while Ethan basked in their praise, his stories growing louder with each beer. I stayed on the fringes, helping with drinks as my father had asked, my presence barely registering. Relatives asked polite questions. "Still doing computer stuff, Sarah?" But their eyes glazed over when I mentioned my work. I felt invisible, the weight of their indifference pressing down, a familiar ache from years of being overlooked. The program began as the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the lawn. My father took the stage, his voice booming through a microphone, delivering a speech that was half toast, half boast. He spoke of the Nguyen legacy's real estate empire, Ethan's groundbreaking designs, the family's rise from immigrants to Austin elite. "We've built something lasting," he said, his chest puffed with pride, "a name that means success." The crowd cheered, but I sat frozen, my name absent from his story, my contributions erased. Ethan stood beside him, soaking in the applause, while my mother beamed from the front row. I gripped my lemonade, my knuckles white, the exclusion cutting deeper than I'd expected. Then, Miss Rosa Martinez took the stage, and everything changed. She was a warm, commanding woman in her 50s, her graying hair pulled into a bun, her eyes alight with passion. As a teacher in East Austin, she'd spent decades lifting kids out of poverty, her work earning her local fame. She spoke about education's power, her voice rich with conviction. "I've seen kids transform when given the right tools," she said, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "One tool has been a game changer for my school, LearnBright, an app that makes learning personal, that gives every child a chance to soar." My heart stopped. The crowd murmured, curious, as Miss Martinez's smile widened. "I'm honored to share that LearnBright's founder is here today," she said, her voice rising. "Sarah Nguyen, where are you? Stand up." The air vanished from the lawn. Heads turned, relatives whispering, their eyes locking onto me. My parents froze, their plates forgotten, their faces blank with confusion. Ethan's beer paused mid-sip, his jaw dropping. I stood, my legs trembling, as Miss Martinez gestured me forward. "Sarah's app is in thousands of schools," she said, her voice ringing with pride. "It's valued at $150 million, changing lives across America. Sarah, come up here." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of astonishment rippling through the lawn. I walked to the stage, my heels unsteady on the grass, my pulse roaring in my ears. Miss Martinez hugged me, her embrace warm, her whisper fierce. "You're a hero to my kids, Sarah." She handed me the microphone, and I faced the crowd, my family's stunned faces burning into me. My father's mouth was tight, his eyes wide. My mother's hands were clasped, her composure cracking. Ethan looked like he'd been punched, his confidence shattered. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling but clear. "LearnBright is my heart," I said, the words spilling out. "It's for every kid who's been told they're not enough, who deserves a chance to learn. I built it despite doubts, despite being told it was just a hobby. I'm proud to share it with you today." The crowd cheered, relatives clapping, some standing, their awe a stark contrast to years of dismissal. I glanced at Ethan, his face pale, his beer forgotten. "Some said I'd never make it," I added, my eyes locking on his. "But I did, and I'm just getting started." The applause swelled, but my focus was on my family, their silence louder than the crowd's roar. I returned to my seat, the world a blur. Relatives swarmed me, their questions tumbling over each other. "How did you do it? $150 million? Really?" A cousin hugged me, whispering, "I had no idea, Sarah." A teacher uncle asked for a demo, his eyes shining. I answered as best I could, my voice steady despite the storm inside. My parents and Ethan stayed at their table, their discomfort palpable, their usual charisma replaced by a stunned awkwardness. I felt a surge of triumph, my heart soaring with a pride I'd never allowed myself to claim. But beneath it was a pang of sadness they hadn't seen me until now, until a stranger forced them to look. The rest of the reunion passed in a haze. Miss Martinez joined me, sharing stories of students who'd thrived with LearnBright, her gratitude humbling. Relatives kept approaching, their admiration a new, unfamiliar warmth. But my family kept their distance, their silence a wall I wasn't sure how to breach. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the lawn, I knew the real confrontation was coming. I'd shown them who I was. But what came next? Could we heal, or would this moment only widen the gap between us? The reunion wound down as dusk settled over the ranch, the crowd thinning, the air cooling as fireflies blinked in the twilight. I stood near the barn, sipping lemonade, my teal dress catching the fading light. My mind replayed the moment on stage, Ms. Martinez's words, the crowd's applause, my family's stunned faces. I'd done what I came to do. I'd shown them I wasn't the failure they'd labeled, that my hobby had changed the world. But the victory felt bittersweet, shadowed by years of hurt, by the silence that still hung between us. I knew a reckoning was coming, and as the last guests drifted to their cars, it found me. My parents approached first, their steps hesitant, their faces a mix of pride and unease. My father's linen shirt was rumpled, his usual authority dimmed, his silver hair catching the string lights overhead. My mother's sundress fluttered in the breeze, her composure fraying, her eyes glistening with something I couldn't name. They stopped a few feet away, as if unsure how to bridge the distance. "Sarah," my mother said, her voice soft, almost fragile, "can we talk?" I nodded, my throat tight, and followed them to a quiet corner of the lawn, where picnic tables sat empty under a canopy of oaks. My mother spoke first, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Sarah, why didn't you tell us?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Your app, LearnBright. It's incredible. We had no idea." Her voice cracked, and I saw a rare vulnerability, a glimpse of the mother who'd once tucked me in with stories of her own struggles. But her question ignited a fire in me, years of pain rising like a tide. "I tried," I said. my voice calm, but edged with steel. I told you about LearnBright years ago when it was just an idea. You called it a hobby, said it wasn't a business. Every time I tried to share my work, you shut me down. You didn't ask, Mom. You didn't care enough to listen. She flinched, her eyes welling with tears, but she didn't interrupt. For once, she listened. I turned to my father, his face pale, his hands clasped, as if bracing for a blow. "And you, Dad?" I said, my voice steady. "You told me I was wasting my potential, that I'd never be like Ethan. You made me feel like my dreams were worthless. Do you know how hard it was to keep going, to build LearnBright despite that?" My words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a decade's hurt. My father cleared his throat, his voice faltering. "Sarah, we were wrong," he said, the words costing him. "We didn't understand what you were doing. But we're proud of you now, truly. Now." The word stung, a reminder that their pride came only after the world had validated me. "It's not enough to be proud now," I said, my eyes locked on his. "You spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough, like Ethan was the only one who mattered. If you want to be part of my life, you have to show me you've changed. No more comparisons. No more dismissing my work. I need you to see me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be." My voice trembled, but I held his gaze, refusing to look away. He nodded, his face tight with regret, and for a moment, I saw the man who'd once believed in me, the father I'd lost to his expectations. Ethan was the hardest. I found him by the dessert table, his polo shirt wrinkled, his face flushed with a mix of shame and defiance. He'd avoided me since the speech, his usual swagger gone, his beer replaced by a water bottle he gripped like a lifeline. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "I need to talk to you." I crossed my arms, bracing myself. Ethan had been my tormentor for years, his jabs sharper than anyone's, his laughter a constant reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let him stew in his regret, but I stayed, curious despite myself. "I'm sorry," he said, the words spilling out in a rush. "I was awful to you. I didn't know about LearnBright, about what you've done. I thought you were just messing around, playing with apps. I was a jerk, and I'm so ashamed." His voice cracked, his eyes avoiding mine, and I saw something new in him, raw, unguarded vulnerability. He wasn't the untouchable engineer now, the golden child who'd always outshone me. He was just my brother, flawed and human, grappling with the weight of his mistakes. I studied him, my anger warring with a flicker of compassion. "You didn't just think I was messing around," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You made sure I felt it. Every time you mocked me, every time you laughed at my work, you made me feel small. You compared me to you, knowing I'd never measure up in their eyes. Why, Ethan, why did it matter so much to tear me down?" My question hung between us, heavy with years of unspoken pain. He looked away, his jaw tight, his hands twisting the water bottle. "I was jealous," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "You were always so free. You did what you loved, even when Mom and Dad disapproved." I followed their plan, MIT, engineering, the awards because I had to. I was the golden child, and it was exhausting. I saw you breaking away, building something real, and I hated you for it. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." His confession stunned me, peeling back the layers of his perfection to reveal a man trapped by the same expectations that had nearly crushed me. I wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the pain he'd caused. But I saw the truth in his eyes, the weight of his own struggles, and I remembered us as kids building forts in the backyard, sharing secrets before ambition drove us apart. "I forgive you," I said, and the words felt like a release, a weight lifting from my chest. "But things have to change, Ethan. I'm not your punching bag anymore. If you want to be my brother, you have to respect Memi work, my life, all of it." He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks, and I felt a fragile hope. Maybe we could rebuild, not as rivals, but as equals. It would take time, but it was a start. As I walked to my car, the night air cool against my skin, I felt lighter than I had in years. The reunion hadn't just been a triumph, it had been a liberation. I'd spent so long craving my family's approval, measuring my worth by their standards. But standing on that stage, seeing their faces, I'd realized I didn't need their validation. LearnBright was my legacy, my proof that I could change the world. And whatever came next, I was ready to face it, not as their daughter or sister, but as Sarah Nguyen, the woman who'd built an empire and found her voice. The weeks after the reunion were a whirlwind. LearnBright's profile skyrocketed, with news outlets calling me education's rising star and schools clamoring to adopt our app. My inbox overflowed with partnership offers, and investors lined up, eager to back the next big thing in edtech. But the real transformation was with my family, a slow, fragile shift that felt both foreign and hopeful. My parents called often, their voices tentative, eager to rebuild. They invited me to dinner at their house, a quiet affair without the usual fanfare. For the first time, they asked about LearnBright real questions, not polite deflections. "How does the AI work?" my father asked, his brow furrowed with genuine curiosity. "Who are the kids using it?" my mother added, her eyes soft. I answered, my voice steady, sharing stories of students like Mia, of schools transformed. They listened, their pride unspoken but palpable, and I felt a crack in the wall between us, but I was cautious. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. I set clear boundaries, my voice firm. No more comparisons to Ethan. I said at one dinner, my eyes meeting theirs. No more dismissing my work as a hobby. If you want me in your life, you have to respect what I've built. They nodded, their agreement a promise I'd hold them to. We started small weekly calls, lunches where they asked about my team, my vision. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, a bridge we were building one careful step at a time. Ethan was a different story. We met for coffee in downtown Austin, a neutral space that felt safer than the ranch. He was nervous, his usual swagger gone, his hands fidgeting with his cup. "I meant what I said," he began, his voice low. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I want to fix this." I studied him, searching for sincerity, and found it in his eyes. He admitted the pressure of being the golden child, how it had trapped him in a role he hadn't chosen. "I was scared of failing them," he said. "So I pushed you down to feel better about myself." I shared my own scars, the years of feeling less than, and for the first time, we talked as equals, not rivals. We began to rebuild, slowly. Ethan visited my office, his jaw dropping at the buzz of our team, the whiteboards covered in ideas. He asked questions about LearnBright, his engineering mind intrigued by the AI. I invited him to a school demo, where he watched kids use the app, their faces lighting up. "You did this," he said afterward, his voice thick with awe. "I'm proud of you, Sarah." The words hit like a shockwave, the validation I'd never expected. We weren't fully healed, but we were trying, and that was enough. Javier was my rock through it all. We'd sit in our office late at night, eating takeout, debriefing the reunion and its fallout. "You slayed that dragon," he said, grinning. "Now what's next?" I laughed, but his question lingered. The reunion had changed me, not just with my family, but within myself. I'd spent so long chasing their approval, measuring my worth by their standards. But proving them wrong had shown me I didn't need it. LearnBright was my purpose, my proof that I could make a difference. I was enough more than enough. I threw myself into LearnBright with renewed fire, launching new features, expanding to rural schools, dreaming of global impact. Every student letter, every teacher's thank you, was a reminder of why I'd started. Mia, now a college student, visited our office, her eyes shining as she hugged me. "You changed my life," she said, and I knew I'd done something lasting. As summer faded into fall, I found a peace I hadn't known before. My family was part of my life again, but on my terms. I'd forgiven them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved to be free. The reunion had been a turning point, a moment when I'd claimed my place, not just in their world, but in my own.